Hi there, this is Jaime Alejandro with the Arts Calling podcast, the place where I interview hardworking independent creatives in the literary, visual, and performing arts. Today, I'm delighted to be Arts Calling writer and performer Jen Ponton. So let me tell you about our guest. Jen Ponton returns triumphantly to the New York stage with SUGARCOATED. It is her autobiographical solo show in its New York premiere. She was last seen off-Broadway in Halley Feiffer's How to Make Friends and Then Kill Them. Jen has spent the last decade building a vibrant career in film and television. Highlights include Dietland, 30 Rock, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Orange is the New Black, Law & Order SVU, and Blue Bloods, among many others. Jen also starred in Ash Christian's Love on the Run alongside Frances Fisher, Annaleigh Ashford, and Steve Howey. She has since appeared in Rebecca Miller's She Came to Me and Todd Solondz' Wiener-Dog opposite Greta Gerwig and Kieran Culkin. Off-screen, Jen is a passionate creator. Her works include the storytelling podcast All the Fucks with co-host Lillian Bussell, a nostalgia-packed puppet sitcom, and her TEDx talk, Hollywood's Fat Phobia Problem. Her collaboration with SUGARCOATED director Tessa Slovis began with Tessa's film Pizza Party, wherein the two found an immediate connection through their commitment to bold activism through storytelling. Be sure to stop by jenponton.com. Jen is currently performing her solo work as part of Maiden Mother Crone, which is an evening of poignant storytelling, a double billing of solo work, currently taking center stage at the Pete at the Flea from February the 12th through the 23rd. And of course, links will be in the episode description for you to check out. Now, without further delay, let's get the show on the road and give Jen a call. Good morning, Jen. How are you?
Good morning, Jaime. I'm exhausted but very satisfied. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. So as it turns out, the show that we are going to be discussing is currently up and running as of this week. Is that right?
That is correct.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm doubly grateful and thankful for your time because I know how important it is to get some rest in the middle of the shows and to have that to be 100%. So I'm going to try to keep it quick and easy for you then, if that's the case. But first and foremost, let's just kind of talk about what the emotions are encompassing this week, because it's rare that I get to speak with somebody who just put out the work, and I'm sort of curious to know sort of how you're grappling with that release of the production and everything that you wanted to say to people.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. That's really thoughtful. Um, I would say everything that has gone wrong this week is so normal, right? For shows. Like we loaded in on Monday the 10th, and from Sunday the 9th, from Super Bowl Sunday, and like trying to get up to New York from Philly, and like already I have staff changes because of family emergencies. There's illness, right? Like it's like, oh boy, we are in it. My playbills are just lost.
Oh
Fe
no.
like, they're lost. FedEx is just the beach ball of doom, and I'm like, "Oh my god." That just kind of kept going, um, but, uh but we did have, the beautiful miracle of by the very first preview, which was Wednesday the 12th, we actually had a pretty good show, and we had a pretty good show with an emergency stage manager who stepped in 24 hours before the
Oh my
first
goodness.
performance. My god, he's an angel on earth, and my co-star Deb, he's a friend and has been working with my co-star Deb for a while, and miraculously, right, it's like the 2 weeks where this guy is free in
Yeah.
between shows, and he was like, "Sure," and I was like, well, like, just kind of, crazy emergency after crazy emergency, weird things going wrong in the theater with the technical elements, with staff, I mean, like, the whole 9. It's a circus. But that first night, I was like, "Oh my god, we actually have we pulled it off. We have a show. We took this bow together. Oh my goodness, maybe it's actually working." And, like, the audiences have been really responsive, which is a beautiful and thrilling thing, like, especially because it's a white box theater. It's all painted white, but it's very intimate and it's immersive, and we've got sort of like a DIY thrust immersion experience, and, um and it's been really exciting to be in it with people and really feel very among them and not, so far removed. So they've been really showing up with, just a lot of presence, like it's a conversation as opposed to, like, I am watching a play
Right,
from back
right.
here.
Which strikes me
Um,
as the best thing to have for a play like this, because if I'm not mistaken, it is a somewhat autobiographical perspective, and it is a solo show, which I feel is can be way more powerful when it comes to conveying something in such a an intimate space like the one that you're talking about, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a real shame for me architecturally because I love, old-timey, beautiful proscenium-y theaters, but I just have not felt
Mhm.
that it's the right venue.
Right.
There might be a day that that comes, and that's also an easier lift.
Yeah.
But, yeah, something like where we are, the Pete in the Flea,
Yeah.
just felt like such a great match and a
Mhm.
really, nice, intimate tone to set.
Yeah. So to provide additional context about the production, because I will certainly clue people in about sort of like the basic idea of this. I sort of want to hear it from you though, because it's such a unique, exciting proposition here that you have as a dual solo show. If you could elaborate a little bit on what that means, but also on Sugar Coated, which is your half, correct?
Mhm,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, so, um so it is a dual solo show with mine, Sugar Coated, and my dear friend Deb's. The longer my mother is dead, the more I like her. And Deb and I have been friends for like 15 years, and I have known Deb as long as I've known Deb. She's been working on this show because her mother had just died, and it was
Oh,
essentially just bringing out like all of the grief and all the tough feelings, like working through a lifetime of baggage with her mom. Um, and so I always knew that this was a part of her. Conversely, for me, mine was like getting struck by lightning, a year and change ago. I went through coming out and divorce and a whole bunch of really wild twists and turns in COVID. And on the other side of it, pretty much once I was divorced, I was like, oh, I need to I need to contextualize and really process all this because not only was it like a really hard and crazy few years, but then it was like, gosh, how long was I really burying this? And what in what ways did I add to it or what ways were heaped upon it? And so I had been kind of working out my feelings and trauma in like essays. Um and I was thinking about writing a book, and it's not a book, but I was talking to this woman who does publishing, and she also does solo shows, and she grabs me and she's like, "Oh my god, Jen, this is a solo show." And it just, lightning moment, and I was like, "Oh my god, yes, the essays, but also let this is the exact right conduit for me
mm,
as a person who mostly, navigates the world as a performer. This is absolutely the right
right.
vehicle." And it also fits it into versus, 40 years of confusion,
Yeah.
like, one nice tight hour of, a charcuterie board, essentially, right? A really well curated charcuterie board of, like,
Right.
these are the 10 th. Yeah.
That's such a great perspective to have, because I think that as a performer, it's almost like you can't look at a text and not want to perform it, bring it into the world, and it's almost like unfinished business. I feel like, I'm primarily a playwright. I record things, but I see something and it's just like the words have to come out, as a performer for some reason. But I imagine the
Totally.
impulse has always been there for solo shows, or is this sort of your first proper foray into solo work?
It's my first one.
Okay.
I was always, I wasn't not drawn to them, especially because as a youngster, I used to do, like, forensics, right, like
Oh
speech and
yeah,
debate.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
right,
so it
yeah.
Hell yeah. Oh, I love Forensics Kids. It's a solo venture, and I was always very comfortable and happy with that, but I didn't it always felt like someone's solo show was really unique to them and really personal and profound. And obviously, because I was in the closet, I didn't know what mine was, and I kept reaching for things, but they felt too flimsy, and I was like, "Well, maybe I just don't have a good solo show in me." So I let it alone, and I wrote screenplays and pilots and features and did plays and the whole 9. And then finally, the second that I knew that this was my solo show, it the faucet was on, and I think I had a first draft definitely within a month. Definitely within a month, if not sooner, and it was a first draft, but, you know you know how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. So the workshopping of this idea, because it felt like a, sure, let's call it a eureka moment, overused but very specific phrase, right? You have this eureka moment that it's going to be conveyed through a one person show, and as you're developing, what are the hangups of the narrative that you feel like, oh man, I can't balance this out, or I can't compress it because life itself, right? You're talking, like decades of experience and hardship and all kinds of things. What's the compression like for you? What are those challenges like?
Um, Definitely the most challenging elements for me, by a long shot, are the most challenging parts of the play for the audience to be with me on. I really tried very hard to jam pack the first act with as much fun as possible because, as you can imagine, the whole "why was I closeted?" trauma, and so that is really what comes to the fore, um, really at, like, the midpoint of the play. So, going through that and trying the tightrope walk, and my director had to encourage me to keep living into it because I was like, "But my audience, I wanna take care of my audience, like,
Mm.
I don't wanna freak them out," and she's like, "That's not your job, honey, your job is to tell your story," and I'm like, "Ugh."
Oh wow. Yeah.
So right? So there has been so much really granular work with, like, especially things like, themes like sexual assault, themes like, gendered violence, things like that. Th There's so much, obviously, that anybody coming into the room probably has some level of history with, and, to be able to lead them to it without anything being, unduly triggering,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Maybe, like, letting lights and sound speak for something versus overt text, or going to allegory versus, like, there's a certain section, it is the hardest section. There's a section that in its original, format, I referred to as the police report because it was like, "Oh, you've annotated everything here. Oh, hmm." And that was the first draft. That was like the pouring out. And I was like, I can't give this to people. This is horrible. I don't even want to acknowledge it myself. So that went through, I mean, my God, so much kneading of the dough until I got that massive bit of police report black into, like, some really distilled moments that are very disturbing, but are nowhere near, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
the just raw nerve, I think, that
Right.
it was when I initially wrote it.
Yeah, I'm curious as a performer, like like what kind of mechanisms you have, like performer tools that like signal to you how that actually works on stage. Because like you sort of have to inhabit the exposition of things. You have to sort of like find a way, and so like what clued you in as you were performing it? Because I imagine like actually performing it clarified that particular moment, right?
Yeah, yeah, certainly in rehearsal, right?
Okay.
So, like, I started basically just readings with my director, just she and I, um, pretty soon after I wrote the script, so she's been along with me, excuse me, since those first iterations. Um, and I think, it was definitely readings with people. So my director Tessa was invaluable, as was my dear friend Catherine, who's also a screenwriter and director. And she really we were like writing accountability buddies, right? We'd sit on Zoom and we would just write the shit out of our projects. And I'd read to her, and she's also gone through boatloads of trauma and was just so helpful in telling me like what felt like it would honor me and protect the audience to a reasonable degree. And then it was just, this nice, really refining between that advice and in working it out with Tessa. And when it was in its final form, Tessa just saying, like, let it be your story. Do not try and protect them. This is matter of fact. I think in the performance too, like once it was being performed for people in earnest, one of the biggest things for me, you're so right in, like, you're inhabiting that narrative, that exposition, and also, to a certain degree, not sitting in it,
Mhm.
having moments where you know that you're gonna sit, but it means that, "All right, this is audiobook level. We're just
Uh,
gonna go through this, and I'm just gonna tell you what it is, and I'm not gonna" right, it's not gonna be a poetry reading.
yeah, yeah, 'cause I guess that I sort of imagine, like, figuring out is like, "No, this is really heavy shit. We can't theatricalize or over theatricalize this particular moment." So I guess it just sort of comes down to getting a feel for sort of that emotional roller coaster as you're performing it, right? But, um
Yeah.
was there something like any other, part of the piece that you felt wasn't resonating, that kinda gave you the biggest grief, outside of the exposition part of it, or sorta like the the dark night of the soul sort of moment that you were describing here? Like, what were there any other hardships in, like, the narrative that you had to clarify, or things that just
Yeah.
gave you way too much grief?
Yeah, there there were transitions. I think probably the biggest umbrella is, like, wanting to wanting to be totally historically not accurate, but to provide tons of information versus only the essentials, right? So when you have to, for the sake of time, cherry pick moments in time to not feel the urge to, like, cover all the history between point A and point B. And there was that, frightened, I think probably. I think very, very likely fear motivated. Desire to, like, and this is why, because this is what happened in between.
Ah,
See this
yeah, okay.
and like really trusting that these pinpoint moments are enough. That's structure enough. Um it that has been a big important developmental curve for me. As um, there's one major transition where we come out of all the gunk and we finally rise into what I think my audience has been hoping from the first moment. And I wrote and rewrote this transition because I could not get it the way I wanted it. Like, I wanted it to not feel like a car with no transmission fluid.
Sure.
You know, I I really was like, "Oh, can this be suave? Can this be smooth? Can this be easy and not clunky?" And, I made a lot of poor choices in the versions where it definitely was, and, like, the sad just got sadder, and then it was like, "Look, let's have fun." And I was like, "Ugh,
Like, you couldn't get out of that gear.
could not, could not." And then when I tried I had to actually, like, break the fourth wall and be like, "It's okay. Come with me. It's fine." So that was, like last year when I was first performing it at, the Denver Fringe, that just like, how are we gonna massage this?" Um, and what it's come to in this draft, which, is at least this version of the draft, is, you know, I think allowing it to just be. Allowing it to just be sad and then taking a breath and letting it be a new moment. And that seems to be, accepted. Like, it seems to feel better in the room. I think it feels better for the audience, and it feels honoring for me because 'cause I'm not, like, forcing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's such a great insight here because I think that as any writer, we do sort of have the propensity to over justify or to feel like this particular moment can't be on its own without this other stuff. And I think like it's that whittling away that like you've just mentioned that it feels like you just have to let things be. And I think I haven't heard it explained in the way that you have. So I think it's such great insight because we can just have the strength or the bravery, whatever it is, to just let the moment be and not really like just pile it on and do that sort of thing. But obviously you mentioned that this is a living, breathing thing as all plays are, but this form seems to be like the one that is just constantly an active. I don't want to call it an active journal because that is a disservice to that form, but like it is sort of like a document that is more willing to change than others. Why is that?
It's a Google Doc. Um, you know, I think I honestly think it's because it's so venue dependent, right? And also, to, like, a more severe degree, if you're doing it in, like, a fringe, like, Deb has had to have a version of her show that is, like, I think 30 minutes long. It's almost
Oh
offensive,
wow.
right?
Wow.
Because of programming and turnovers and things like that. And, Tessa and I are talking about, like, what's next for Sugar Coated, and she's like, "Maybe we can find our way back to, like, a 75-minute version," which is I think what I was running I think what I was running basically last year at Denver Fringe was, like, an hour 15, and I killed so many darlings in between, but also it feels really good as is, right? I have no idea what I'd integrate back or if I'd write a little bit of new material. Yeah, I think it's because it's very venue dependent and a little bit audience dependent, right? There are people who take their solo shows on, like, college tours. There are probably ways that I would modify this show for a college tour. I'm not entirely certain how, but, like, I would love that financial and career opportunities, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure you know?
Right. But it is a more malleable, project so that you can better serve audiences and maybe by the end of it, you might have, like, if I'm not mistaken, maybe, like, 2 or 3 solid versions. You could say, "Hey, here's a 45 minute, here's a 60, and here's a 75," take your pick. What works?
Totally. Yeah,
Wow. So
absolutely.
that's a very, like, pragmatic sort of way of looking at it as well, which I think is sort of at the core of these kinds of productions as well, when we're talking about fringe, when we're talking about just sort of like making those things happen on your own. And I'm curious, like, if there were any hesitation at all in the logistics, like, how did you handle that particular part of the process, like actually bringing this thing to life, and what were the obstacles like, of actually mounting, let's say, this production in particular?
Yeah, this one in particular. Um, well, tragically, New York theater really has changed quite a bit since COVID. I mean, everything has. But when I was first like, I'm a career New Yorker. I'm gonna go put on a play. And then I was like, oh, nobody works anywhere anymore. Like these emails go into black holes. People don't pick up the phone because I guess they're just like not staffed, right? A lot of theaters closed. Easy spaces, like 4-floor walk-ups that are just all painted black 70 layers in, right? Um, I think they've just kinda lost a lot of access. So, the first unpleasant surprise was sort of in the middle of the summer when I was like, "Great, I'm gonna do a New York run. Time to start, pounding the pavement." And I was like, "Where is everyone? Where is nobody responding to my emails? Why can't why are these websites, like, down or these phones?" Um, so that was an unpleasant reality. And then, in terms of, like and financially, inflation has affected everything, COVID has affected everything. Prices of everything are higher, and it's way more challenging, I think, than it was 5 to 10 years ago to be like, let's put on a play. Let's chuck in each, like a couple thou, and we've got it done. Easy, dusted. Um, it doesn't feel like that now. This feels like an honest to God, like I am a producer of a show.
Mhm.
Help me.
Yeah. My goodness, and it's, I'm glad that you mentioned this because I think the landscape for any artist in this day and age is completely overrun with hardship and complication. But I think, as you say, financially with inflation and things, I mean, it's got to be incredibly difficult. So, how do we remind people that there is value in this, in particular the audiences? Like, what does a proposition look like now, where you have to be like, theater is still here, what does that look like?
Yeah, it is challenging. It is challenging. I mean, we are just at collectively trying so hard. My publicist, Katie, is such a rock star, over at Campfire. She's, like someone saw us, a light up, like, bus shelter sign on the street, and I was like, "Holy shit." Um, and, we've it's a learning curve because it's hard to take the temperature of, like, what's working now. So right when I'm about to, like, invest in Facebook ads, Meta becomes the Antichrist,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, okay, and now people are leaving Instagram, and now TikTok is, like, "All right, where are the tools that we need?" We did invest in a flyer guy, 40 Flyers, who has been doing it for, like, longer than I've been alive.
Wow.
So, we've got, like, literally the signs up in the streets. Um, so I was hoping that that might, like, help drive foot traffic, strangers, people who are not already necessarily in our scene or who
Mhm.
know any of us. So it's been a tough moving target. Also, like, trying to choose show times. I'm like, "What's the industry standard?" There's no industry standard anymore. Show times for Broadway and off-Broadway are all over the place. It's so weird. Like, I saw a showtime for, like, a Wednesday at 4 p.m. tea time. What is that? I mean, I would go to it, but I'm like, "How none of this is measurable.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
figure out where I should." So a lot of it, it's probably a very expensive, um, crash course.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's,
They had better answers. I
no,
don't
no, but I
care.
I think, I appreciate you sharing that because it does give us context, on a, like, nationwide level. I think people still look up to sort of the way that New York runs and operates and sort of what that looks like, but it's a signal to the rest of the country that there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of coming back to that pre-2020 level, which is pretty insane to me, because I personally believe that we need theater now more than ever because of its tactile, real world application that a lot of people just don't know what that looks like anymore. Myself, even as a theater person, I'm like, I haven't been to a show in a while, and w- I don't know. It just seems like we're ripe for a reminder of what it means to be in a room with people. You know,
Absolutely. I'm on the exact same page, 1,000%. I believe it, and also I have been very much a hermit for 5 years, right? Like, I am a homebody, but also I've been a COVID hermit. So, this is also, like, one of the more personal and beautiful parts of it is, like, I've been able to tell people N is I'm not myself a New Yorker. I'm a lifelong New Jersey, and I'm very proud of it. But because of all of the tumult in my life, I ended up landing closer to Philly, and I was never a South Jersey, Philly person. Um, I am now. It's interesting. But I haven't been local, and so I haven't and auditions aren't live anymore, so you're not coming into town and, like, going out to lunch or coffee with a friend. It really has, like, sucked the interaction out of your social life, so to even just be able to screw my head back on and be like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna be in New York, and I'm gonna be in a room doing this thing that we love to do together. Oh my god, would you please come? Let me share this part of myself with you. Let me be in a room with you. Let me hug you." let me also try and, like, actually go out and get that coffee with you next week because I think really more than COVID and more than even living further away is the auditions, and I like self-tapes, is maybe the worst part of it. I love self-tapes. Um, but I feel like auditions were really necessarily motivating for me to, like, get into New York and be among the people and go see friends, and that really has, um, been a bummer of a change, I think.
Right, right. But, hopefully, we can turn this around, and I feel as an industry, there's a lot of possibility for us to double down on what it means to do this and why it's important, but, in this climate, and I don't mean to make this a political conversation, but it is
Oh, we need
necessary
to.
sort of,
Hell
uh
yeah.
to sort of address this, but, like, circling whatever this fascist hellscape we are entering, I mean, what does a show like yours do? And it's not that I expect or believe that, like, there's, like, this hardline responsibility, that, like, art is gonna go and change legislation or anything like that, but, in
We could
terms of
dream.
yeah, we could dream, but, I'm just curious, like, what new context you have found for your work coming into this new landscape, that we're all sort
Right,
of dreading.
right. Because I mean, I wrote this show certainly, and then I booked this show before the election. So, I was like, "Oh, this is a bummer," and then then all of January happened, and I was like, "Oh, It's just like, "Oh, this is the moment I'm emerging into." And I think, you know, I'm gonna speak for all of us. White women have been a problem over and over, and, like, that's definitely not to let anyone else in the vein of, like, white supremacy and fascism off the hook, but I think there is so much in my show. It is for queer people, and it is a love letter to queerness and to how irrepressibly true and real and necessary your one's queerness is. I saw a video this morning of my friend who is trans, and um, they are currently identifying more as she, and, like, it is this beautiful acknowledgement of, like, "I don't think I'm non-binary anymore. I am, like, a woman." And they're just, like, weeping, and they're like, "I can see myself growing into my mother, which is always who I thought I was." And it's just like, don't you see how important it is for everybody to be able to be themselves, for everybody to be able to live into that? Because that person is not only going to inspire other trans people, but them being able to be themselves, her being able to be herself, is going to take care of the world around her. She's going to be kinder to the person on the train. They're going to be kinder and, more compassionate with the person at their workplace. It infuses everything. And I think that I think that just that sense of, like, we don't choose this. This is what you may find to be your truth that totally upends your life. It's okay. That has always been you. It's always been you. That you are not different than you were. You're just allowed to be yourself. I think that is a huge, enormous, beautiful queer love letter in my piece. And I think, secondarily it is this real reckoning. It is a real reckoning with gendered violence. And I think that white women as this troubling monolith, I think it is, the sociological rule of, like, if I am a little bit or if I am oppressed at any level, I'm going to double down on oppressing those and, punching
Mhm,
down on those
mhm.
who are more oppressed than me so that I can feel free. And I think that that is a particularly dangerous place for anybody to be in because you feel like the victim and yet you are being incredibly violent to people who are much more marginalized than you. Um and I think, this is really a story of, like, pushing through that gendered violence, pushing through these expectations and all the trappings that of womanhood that do happen to you that can perhaps make you a mean motherfucker of a person who chooses to Karen out at people. But can you then use it to liberate yourself? Can you make the really, really hard, brave choice to liberate yourself versus choosing to punch down in resentment of your own life and the circumstances that you are trapped in under patriarchal white supremacy?
Man, I
Mhm,
that is about the as good as it's gonna get. I mean, I love that, that perspective and just this notion of having the absolute courage to look inward, which I think is at this point, it's a superpower because clearly, like, a majority of us are either not willing, don't want to, but to look inward is literally an act of salvation, into becoming a better human being. But it is almost an impossibility because the easiest thing is to just yell at somebody else, that they're doing something wrong or that they're not as oppressed as I am or something like that, turning it into a competition. But I am
mhm.
curious, and normally I begin the podcast asking a little bit more of your origin story, trying to get to know you a little bit more. But maybe we can go there for just a minute because I feel it might serve this presentation of your solo work. What do you think were the embers? Like, what's the earliest thing that you sort of provide us with in the show that you remember? I mean, I think like in terms of childhood, there's like these pillars, right? Of things that linger with you. What do you think are those pillars in your show that you feel have been a through line in your entire life that have always been with you?
Yeah. Um, definitely longing. And like actually this question works great because my show it's like a Candyland playing board, right? You're dropped right in, house opens, and we're at my 7th birthday party. So you drop right in and then we go all the way to 40, right? Um, but I think the like biggest themes and pillars, longing, um I have always been a very romantic, whimsical, rhapsodic individual. And I was, yeah, just in a vice grip of longing. Um, I'm also like, I'm a fat woman. I was a fat kid. I was put on diets. I was, under the regime of punitive exercise. There's a lot of longing for like, treats and relatability to other kids who were able to have, like, sweets and things and be around each other and go to parties and not be policed. There's, the main what do I wanna say? The main conceit of the show is that we are around a big pink birthday cake, but it's all styrofoam, and so I can't eat it. So, there are so many moments in the show where it's like, "I wanna eat the cake." And
Uh,
what is the cake? The cake is self-love, the cake is safety, the cake is, acceptance, the cake is absolutely queerness and being able to access queer romance the way that these embers show up. And then, like, really, really practical, like, "Oh, yeah, that kid is gay from Space ways." Like, the one of the earliest moments I also drop us into is Girl Scout camp, which is
mm.
canonically so queer and, like, being around right? Being around, like, these butch camp counselors
Mm,
who it's unspoken, but
mm.
they're all queer, and my god, what I wouldn't give to be able to drop myself back in time as an adult and, like, go live that queer counselor life. But, just being absolutely I mean, I idolized these women. I
Mm.
idolized them and was just enchanted by them. And so, like, oh, those early moments too. "Oh, alright, your favorite song is, like, Closer to Fine. Alright, well" Um, yeah, fun stuff like that. And, like, when I would have crushes on boys, which we also get to, like, they were very, very feminine looking boys, like, they looked
Mm.
like the prettiest lesbians on earth, basically. Right? Like, just cherubic, soft, really feminine, beautiful features, like, and not knowing and being just like, What's happening?"
So I love that I found this description of you and your work. Yeah, a description. It was the love child of Tina Fey and John Hughes. What a great pitch line! That is one of my favorite things ever. So let's talk about sensibility for a little bit because I think you've touched on this throughout, and the fact that you're creating work like this is so inspiring to me. And I love this notion of fully doubling down on wonder to express whether it's queerness or body positivity or anything else. How do you arrive at knowing your perspective? How tied in is it to gender identity? How not tied in is it? Because it feels like at this point we meet you through your work and even right now as somebody who knows, who is certain, who has a little bit more of that level footing that that people a little bit younger might not have just yet.
Yeah. Um, I found it one of the one of the best scenes that I didn't know was gonna be in there, right? It is really just it is a chocolate box. It's a very well selected, I think, chocolate box. I got really lucky. I was like, "Do these work? Oh my god, yeah, they do." Um, there was I think the moment in adulthood because another interesting queer element of it is I okay, I'm from Jersey. Jersey women are, like, inherently a little bit butch, no matter who they are, right? The straightest women are a little bit butch because 'cause we're Jersey. So, I love butches. I am not butch. I love butches so much. I get stupid over butches. And here I am in this place where I think, you know, we do the hair, we do the nails, we do like heavy eyeliner. And I'm like, I don't understand. But also I like the way you talk and I like the way you give me shit. But also you're only into boys, and that's very clear, right? So just like not knowing, not having any really good moments through adolescence and also being in theater, right? I wasn't in field hockey. I couldn't find the lesbians in school, and then, like, conversely, my partner, like, played basketball and could always find the lesbians and the queer women. No, I, of course, am the jackass who goes into choir and theater, and so I'm around all the gay boys, but all the straight girls, and so I just did not have I call it, uh, I call it, what do I call it? Butch Butch restriction. I was on butch restriction pretty much from Girl Scout camp until college. And when I saw butches again in the wild for the first time again, I was like, "Oh, something is happening." And then being in, I think, to speak politically, right? Then to be in like fat liberation, body liberation, queer liberation circles as an adult, I was immediately around a lot of butches and trans masc people, and I was like, "Oh, this is not just something that happens once in a while. This is like a rule for my life. I just have never been where the butches are, and now I'm where the butches are, and why is my and I'm married, and I do love my husband, but also my body has never done this before, and my whole brain is just exploding." Um, and I think I've finally found something that I could never quite get enough proof to really believe about myself. And once I had that moment, and that is a really, really rhapsodic, beautiful, fun, exciting, juicy moment in the play. And that was really when I was like, uh-oh. I thought maybe I was a girl who was like a little bit Jersey Butch and had like just a curiosity sometimes. But now this is like, I am daydreaming about them. I am, you know, looking at them on the street. I'm like way more fixated on this. And the juxtaposition of that was learning finally that I'm a femme and being able to really embrace that because femme as a queer identity versus like being a cis feminine woman is just gorgeous. It it anoints all these parts of femininity that are culturally just punished in heteronormative culture. Um, Caregiving and gentleness and love and softness um and touch and tears and feelings. It takes all of that that we are just really like pounded upon in heteronormative culture, and it vaults it because everybody's got their superpower, and the superpower of femmes is like leaning into this goddess like vision of a peaceful soft life. Like nap culture is so femme, right? The nap ministry is so femme. Tarot, so femme. Mutual aid, so femme, right? Like all of these all of these things. And so to feel finally, because I've also always been really girly. I want to be like a little princess. I want to be in poofy dresses. And I was like, I can't be gay, you know? But that really helped, like, oh, this is who I am. It's like somebody seeing the right Barbie doll at the store and being like, oh, finally, this doll looks like me. This doll is my color, this doll is my shape, this yeah, now I can see it.
That's so wonderful. I'm gonna remember that forever. It's like seeing your Barbie doll, the one, like finally after all this time. And hey, you've come a long way, and it's better late than never. And to have that beautiful gift to accept yourself, is it makes for, not only a better human being, of course, but a better artist. And it allows you to see things clearly, and puts the right kind of framing around your life. Now, I only have a couple more questions to be mindful of your time. You've already been tremendously generous with me.
Such a good
um,
time with me, it's all good.
well, I normally try to ask this because we're looking for a bit of optimism in these troubled cataclysmic times, these
Same.
you know, this mad hour. But I'm curious, what is lifting you up right now? Obviously, production doesn't leave a lot of room for other things, but say leading up to the production, what was keeping you grounded? What was what kind of art specifically was inspiring you, if you had any time for that?
Ah, well, I have been watching a lot of Twin Peaks.
That's
I
right.
was watching yeah,
Yes.
hell yeah. I have been watching a lot, and I was weirdly, I started watching it again even before David Lynch died. I was like,
Oh,
"It's time for Twin Peaks. It's time
yeah,
for me to
yeah,
just, like, watch some art." And, it is so good. I love how much he takes his time.
yeah,
Those
yeah,
scenes are slow.
yeah.
And I love that it just makes me slow down, and I mean, I love everything about it, but, yeah, I watched a ton of Twin Peaks. I was reading this beautiful novel called Thrust by Lydia Yuknavitch, I believe is her name. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I mean, it's in fact, in this mad hour, it is this sort of painful but beautiful imagining of, like, the apocalyptic future, but how we take care of each other in it. How we and how brave people across time find each other through the threads of time, and their bravery, how it trickles down. It's just beautiful. That was a gorgeous, gorgeous book to read, and it was, like, so painful because, like, I don't see anything that's not, brutalist for the dear future, but also we are still here. We still do beautiful things, and all we're really on this earth for, besides not ruining it, is to take care of each other, and we can maybe do that part, even if the first part we have royally shit the bed. Um, so yeah, I would say that's the art that I've
Ah,
been, just binging.
I need to check out that book. That sounds amazing. But I'm glad you bring up Twin Peaks and David Lynch, because that is listen, I've been a fan of David Lynch for so long. He's one of those where you saw the first movie, the first work of his that you saw, and it immediately just struck me as like, I'm in love with this, whatever this is, and I'm gonna follow it to the ends of the earth. And when I heard word, and I don't mean to digress too much, this hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was like, why? Well, this man had courage to follow it, and in the way that every artist should aspire to. And that's just my 2 cents. I'm very, very saddened still, but anyway, let's.
Yeah. It felt like losing Bowie and Prince back in
Yeah,
2016.
yeah.
It
I'm
was
I'm thinking I'm
oh,
thinking yeah, it was right around that too.
yeah.
But okay, I got one too. It might feel like an extension of this last question, but we try to find solace in community. We try to find solace in each other, and in the work that we do. But I'm curious to know, what are the things that keep you going as a human being? Like, it doesn't have to be art related, but just what gets you up in the morning, and what do you look forward to at the end of the day? Like, what brings you peace and solace and recharges you? If Yeah, I'm curious to know, because I think we need it now more than ever.
Dogs. Definitely dogs. I have 2 dogs. They're wonderful. They're crazy. I adore them. Um, that is like, oh, dogs are a great reminder of presence, and, like, they don't know what's going on, and for just a moment, you could not know what's going on too, and just, like, go for a walk with them, or, like, rub that little belly and just look at the wonder that is that little belly, that it gives you these moments, and connection, like, honest to God connection with people feels so good. Um, I mean, I love being able to open up, be vulnerable with people, being able to see almost like a child's growth chart, like, my partner and I, um, we're very good growth accelerators for each other, like, we are
Mm.
rock tumblers for each other in ways that are exhausting and also very, very beautiful, right? 'Cause, like, I don't wanna do all this inner work, but then it's like, "Oh, yeah, all right, I'm better for this." And so, being able to be like, "Yes, gold sticker, look how brave you were today." Like, I love that. I love cooking. Cooking is such an underrated activity of creativity.
Mhm.
Um, just feeling like the actual nourishing power of everything out there is harmful. I'm going to make something from the earth and I'm going to feed it to someone I love and I'm going to give them nutrients and comfort and, you know, and a safe place to sit and enjoy themselves. Um that feels really good too. Just like texting friends. I've become a much better texter in the
Mm.
last couple years since I finally got my footing, because I didn't text very well at all before that. And now I'm like, "I'm so sorry. This is how we practice friendship, and let me do that." I also have, despite the fact that Instagram is still under Zuckerberg, um, I do have a group chat with my best friend and
Mm.
her partner, and we are just on it all day long, and just like memes are a love language. Absolutely. Memes are the very, very acceptable love language that I think more and more of us speak every day.
Yeah, I think that's my wife and I's love language at this point. I mean, it's either quoting movies or your favorite meme. Send it along. But yeah, with that, I think that's a beautiful light note to end on. But Jen, I want to thank you so much for, not only your time, but for the type of work that you're creating, which is so bold and courageous and full of light. Because I think that even though there's a tremendous amount of hardship here that you're covering, and really difficult stuff, I think it's a great model to follow in terms of following the levity and the things that the wonder that allows us to overcome these things. So it's been really inspirational to me, and I hope that we get to chat again, because I know we just scratched the surface. So thank you so much.
We're not strangers anymore.
That's right. That's right.
This is really beautiful. I would absolutely love for you to come to the show as well. If there are any dates that work for you, please just let Katie know, and we would love to have you.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much, Jen. But I will let you enjoy the rest of your day off. And hey, break legs the rest of the run. I'm really excited for you. Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much. Hi, may you be well.
You too. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.